Hi. Great. We're going to get started on our workshop today. Thank you all for coming to the community workshop put on by the Climate Emergency Mobilization Committee. We're so grateful you're all here, and I'm really looking forward to spending this time together. I'm Michelle Ellison, for those of you whom I don't know. I'm on the Climate Committee, and right here we have my fellow committee members. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Ryan Hawley. Oh, sure. Ryan. I don't want to go in a long-winded thing, but yeah, I'm a local resident and own a business now. I'm an environmental consultant. Worked with the city for a number of years on several projects, and we also focus in ecological restoration. But we've looked at one of the most sort of pressing issues that I'm interested in with the committee is carbon sequestration and working with replanting trees, and that's kind of a topic that I'm really interested in.
Hey, I'm Bill White. I'm almost a resident of Ojai, then one block beyond the city limits. I'm a mechanical and environmental engineer with my office in Ventura, and my passion at this time is climate and global warming and trying to do something about it. I am a member of this Climate Emergency Mobilization Committee for the city. I see a big opportunity for the city of Ojai to be a leader in pushing climate change solutions throughout Ventura County and the state and beyond. Really hopeful that the city will pick up the banner and carry with it. I'm also a member of the County Planning Commission and have spent a lot of my energy on the Planning Commission pushing for climate change solutions in the general plan update. The county's working right now on the 2040 general plan update, which will look forward another 20 years as to how the unincorporated county will develop. And I'm glad you're all here. We live in an amazing valley here, and we can be leaders in dealing with climate change.
My name is Jim Selman. I'm a relatively new member of Ojai. I got here in 2012. My work is as a consultant working with organizations and some government agencies and so forth on the subject of large-scale change. And how do you shift the mindset and the relationships that people have, and how do you bring about the kind of change that's needed in the world today. I've also written a book called Living in a Real-Time World. I'm excited to be a part of this and echo everything that Bill said in terms of the opportunity that we in Ojai have to be a voice for what's possible and to bring about the quality and level of change that's obviously needed in the world today.
And I'm Steve Colomé. I have an academic background in an unlikely combination of molecular biology, physics, and epidemiology. And I've been working for the last, I recounted 50 years now, on air quality and climate issues. I'm retired from the faculty in the School of Public Health at UCLA, member of this committee, member of the Ojai Valley Advisory Group to the Air Pollution Control District in Ventura County, and a hearing board officer for the Air Pollution Control District in Santa Barbara County.
All right, to set up the framework for our conversations today, I'd like to start with the reason we're here. We're here because we're in a climate emergency, and humanity is facing an existential threat. Yes?
Who are you?
Oh, I introduced myself a little bit ago. Michelle Ellison. I'm also on the committee.
Can you give a little bit about your background?
Sure. I'm a resident of Ojai. I've been here about 7 years. My husband is born and raised in Ojai. We have 2 young children. I've been involved in climate advocacy for the last 4 years since I had my aha moment. I am helping the city, serving as an alternate director on the Clean Power Alliance Board, which is our new electricity provider serving Ojai. Climate committee here. I'm on the board of the Green Coalition, so involved in various ways in the city and county on climate advocacy. Thank you. So getting back to the framework as to why we're here, we're in a climate emergency and humanity is facing an existential threat. A little over a year ago, many of you would recall, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change sounded the alarm bells in a dire report, warning that governments everywhere must take, quote, rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society, end quote, to dramatically cut emissions by 2030 if we hope to avoid climate catastrophe. So we've got just 10 years, and likely even less than that, since more sobering findings regarding tipping points and feedback loops have come out in recent months. As Bill McKibben put it, winning slowly is the same as losing when it comes to climate change. Since we neglected to take the necessary actions decades ago, we no longer have the luxury to take small incremental steps. The magnitude and urgency of the crisis requires big, bold, swift action. It means no more business as usual, no more kicking the can down the road, no more catering to fossil fuel interests, no more short-term thinking, no more excuses. It means a World War II scale mobilization. It means disruption, transformation, and regeneration. It means coming together and working toward our common good. It means a moonshot, putting a stake in the ground and committing to achieving it. The good news is that we have solutions, and Ojai has already taken some significant steps to act on climate. In July, upon the urging of many concerned individuals in the community, many of you are here, the City Council declared a climate emergency, joining over 1,300 jurisdictions worldwide. We are the first in Ventura County to do so. The city then formed a climate emergency mobilization committee and appointed us committee members. The role of the committee is to help identify and recommend high-impact emissions reduction and carbon sequestration measures with a focus on climate mitigation. That's a mouthful, sorry. So I like to think of Ojai as the little town that could. Yes, we're small, but we sure are mighty. What we do here, as Phil was mentioning, has an impact not just within our 4 square miles of the city limits, but within the county, within the region, the state, and even beyond. For example, Ojai was among the first cities to set 100% renewable as the default with Clean Power Alliance. Several other municipalities followed suit, and as of last year, 750,000 people in Ventura and LA counties are powering their homes and businesses with 100% renewable energy. Due in large part to Ojai's leadership, Ventura County, get this, now has the largest population in all of the United States on 100% renewable energy. We are leading the nation here in Ventura County with 500,000 people on 100% renewable energy. As a side note, Ventura County also happens to be the 3rd largest oil-producing county in the state of California. So if we can achieve clean energy here, I believe we can do it anywhere. As another example of leadership, Ojai was the 2nd city in the state to electrify its landscaping equipment. That just happened this last year or two. And it received an American Green Zone Alliance certification. Now, there's a wave of cities throughout the state considering doing the same. So yes, we have the ability to alter the trajectory of the global climate crisis by what we do in our small but mighty town. Ojai is especially equipped to lead because of our many committed and knowledgeable individuals and organizations working on climate, many of you here. So thank you to each of you from leading from where you are. And it's been so moving to see so many of our local youth really engaging in climate activism, showing up at climate demonstrations and working in the schools. We are so fortunate also to have elected council members who recognize the climate crisis and are taking action. Thank you, Johnny. I know he's not here. Randy, Bill, is Ryan here? And Susan. Yes, thank you for your leadership on this. So the purpose of today's workshop is to have a conversation, to learn from one another and generate ideas about what we can do locally to act on climate. In terms of geographic scope, we will be focusing on the city of Ojai since that's where the city council has direct jurisdiction. Those 4 square miles run from Gridley to right around here, and we have a map over there on the wall which outlines the city boundaries. The rest of the Ojai Valley is part of unincorporated Ventura County, and the Board of Supervisors is the governing body there. Issues around agriculture and oil and gas extraction, for instance, aren't as prevalent within the city as they are within the valley. In terms of subject matter scope, we will be focusing on climate mitigation. In other words, getting at the cause of the problem and drawing down emissions to stop making the problem worse. Climate adaptation and resiliency, on the other hand, deal with the consequences of climate change. issues around water and fire, for instance. And while vitally important, it's not the focus of today's discussion. As those ideas arise, we'll have a separate area, probably on this board over here, where we can jot those ideas down so they don't get lost. We certainly want to capture them. In terms of sequence and flow, our agenda is posted right here. The remainder of the workshop will be very participatory, and Jim will be leading that. We'll wrap up by 1. There's coffee and water. Feel free to help yourselves. We don't have a dedicated break time, so kind of we're keeping it casual. Serve yourselves, and then in terms of restrooms, we have you can exit the door here, and the building adjacent with a picture of a tree. That's where we have restrooms. And then special thanks to Luis Gomez, who's back there. He's with the City of Ojai, for helping coordinate the logistics of the workshop. And our superintendent, Tiffany Morse, isn't here, but she arranged for the use of this wonderful space. So thank you to Tiffany. So before we get started, if we could just go around the room, and if each of you could just briefly introduce yourself and say what brings you here. So do you want to start on this table?
My name's Russell Casson. I'm just a local water professional and interested in the matter that we're going to be discussing.
A very knowledgeable water. Bill Warwick, City Council.
This table, you can go ahead.
Hi, I'm Dee Reed. I guess my two biggest issues are climate and affordable housing, and I actually believe they're linked.
Jeffrey Starkweather. I grew up in Mining Oaks, but I've been out of the state into North Carolina, where I was an attorney and a newspaper editor, and interested in all the rest of issues.
I'm Jim Odling, we're in Miners Oaks. My interest in this is a lifetime career in environmental protection. My career working for Los Angeles County Fire Department as a hazmat emergency responder. And one note that the gravity of the situation we're in is describing here today, I was noticing the grackles outside. It weren't here 20 years ago. That's
Exactly.
climate change. They actually been able to come up with this.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Could I ask that you speak up for the people in the back? And also because it's being
Oh, you can
recorded.
see up here too.
Yeah.
Up here, there's room up here. Yeah.
But it's.
Yeah.
Good idea, everybody should speak as loud as you can.
Yeah, and you can sit down here, right here, at the bottom. You want to come up here? There's space.
My name is Renee Roth, and I've been here for 17 years, and I've been following the water situation and the climate situation. Most recently, I got it, that there's an acceleration of that. We haven't known forever in our lifetime, and once I got that, my daughter said, "Thank you, Mom, you finally get it." So I feel like I have to do everything I can to step forward and do what I can.
I'm Jerry O'Connor. I've lived here for 4 years. I'm just an interested citizen. I feel helpless sometimes when I see everything that's going on, and think that I'd just like to join the fight.
Jeff Weber, I'm a holistic physician and author, climate group support facilitator here in Ojai, and primarily a climate change activist.
I'm Anita Henderson, who's super smart and very helpful. just to let you know that this guy is pretty darn amazing. I won't go into all details, but anyway, I'm a local who has been interested in various issues from time to time. Affordable housing is one of them, and climate change is another. And I feel like the situation is dire. We have to do a radical change. I think we need a major shift in values, at least in the way that we manifest our values. So I hope that we're all up for it and that we rise to the occasion.
Tell them your name.
Oh, my name is Lily Hendricks. Thank you.
I'm Christine Brennan, longtime resident. I live in Miners Oaks, and been a member of the Green Coalition and just environmental activist, I suppose, artist, and currently a member of the Ojai Trees. So I'm also here as a liaison in capacity as an Ojai tree person.
I'm
January Powers. I'm on the Ojai City Planning Commission and newly on the board of the Green Coalition, and been an environmental advocate for, geez, almost 50 years, I'd say, at this point. And I'm here to learn and share, and I'm also a group facilitator.
Chelsea Satula, I live in Ojai, have a small business in Ojai, Sussex Big Collective, so I'm here representing small businesses and what we can do to try to mitigate this problem. And I'm just a lifelong environmental activist, hoping I help in whatever way I can.
I'm Vivian Jacob, I live in Miners Oaks, and I'm concerned about the environment and we can do that. That's what the change is eradicated.
I'm Kevin Barron. I've been living in the valley since '97 and raised my family here. The 4 kids, 2 of which have been very active in getting this climate emergency declared at the City Council. I'm very proud of that, and hopefully they'll be here soon. But I think that one thing I'd like to say is that I think that I don't want to get in the hair of the mandate of the committee, but I think that in any emergency, my son and I took the community emergency response training from a firefighter, the former firefighter of Santa Paula. And one of the things that he said, which I think is really important, is that in any emergency, you need to assess the situation. And to rush in with solutions is as dangerous as not doing anything. I'm not suggesting we hold back and, have committees ad nauseum. I'm an action guy. I worked for 24 years at the university in IT, and I'm very focused on getting things done. But I do think that it's worthwhile to look at what resources we have in the community, but that means both in terms of people and other things that we can bring together. And I think focusing on greenhouse gas emissions is a little too circumscribed. I think we need to broaden things to look at all of the contributing factors. I mean, most people will tell you at this point, most experts, climate change and climate scientists will tell you that greenhouse gases are one thing, but biological issues are another. And looking at the insect population that's just been decimated, those are the things that's how we get our food. So I think we need to look at those things. What can we do as a small community? It doesn't need to be huge things, but it can have a huge impact. And I think we need to look broader too at what other communities have done, learn from other communities, and not, like you said, the little end in the fid, but we should also not be too insular and look at, learn from other communities.
We agree with you.
Join on that back table, if you get everyone there.
My name is Kathy Wattis, and so I moved to Ojai in 2012. And I'm a retired city planner, always been interested in progressive issues and climate change. But I am very interested in Ojai leading the way as an exemplary community and in terms of what can be done and influencing others. I think that's a great place to start and a good vision for all of us.
Hi, I'm Robin Gerber. I've spent the last several years working with Seafrog, Climate First, replacing oil and gas, giving hell to the fossil fuel industry.
Russell Sidney, I'm the founding co-organizer of the Electric Vehicle Advocates of Ventura County. I've been working with the Complete Streets to create safe routes to school and to improve the safety improvements for the active transportation grant on both Ojai and Maricopa. The Electric Vehicle Advocates are the ones who have been bringing electric vehicle showcases to Ojai since 2000, for at least the last 8 years or so. Michelle's doing a good job of taking that over, so we're pleased about that. I also am the founding co-organizer of the Sustainable Transport Club, which is a group that helped to get Santa Monica's mass transit, bicycle, and electric vehicle infrastructure put in place. And that effort started back in about 2003. So I've been in the transportation part of mitigating fossil fuel disruption since, very actively and engaged since then.
I'm Susan Francina, practically a lifelong Ojai resident. We came here in 1957 when I was 7 years old. So I have kind of a vision of taking Ojai back to the good old days. For example, I'd like to see, I'm involved with almost every city committee. I'm the liaison to the Ojai Valley Green Coalition. I'm the liaison to Ventura County Animal Services. I'm a huge advocate of spay and neuter. I think that should be part of the climate emergency because animals eat all this factory farmed meat. So I support everything that's been said. I'm an advocate for almost everything that's been said. And I'm on the Complete Streets Committee, and I have a vision when I said that I'd like Ojai to look more like it was back in 1957. That doesn't mean reduce the population or anything unrealistic, but to go back to a time when the children could ride their bicycle to school and not have to be driven by parents, and see our way to managing the tourist industry so that the traffic impact can completely go away. That's one of the missions of the Complete Streets Committee. And I think I introduced the concept of sustainable communities when I first ran for city council in 1994. I remember giving out these handouts, talking about regenerative agriculture, everything. So I'm just delighted that 20 years later that I'm in a room full of these wonderful people, and I just love working with you all. Thank you.
Cam Campbell, been in the Ojai Valley for 45 years, and for 45 years or more, I've known about climate change and been working on these issues from way back in my university days. And for the last 20 years, I've founded California Solar Electric. We've deployed like megawatts of solar out there. But my prime base thing that I do every day is ride my bike. You know, the simplest, easiest solution is to walk the bike. We have a beautiful community. That's out of our vehicles, gets us close to the ground. And you can notice the changes. You know, I've noticed the changes over the years of the climate in Ojai. Because you observe, it's observable. You know? So anyhow, from now on, I'm going to be the advocate of getting on the ground, riding your bike, walking. We are trying to create a community where that is the primary way of getting around. And then you meet people too. You talk to people, you interact. Basic, very basic. By the way, I think the bicycle is the most efficient machine ever created. I think anybody has something different.
I'm David Garber. I'm a local tube mechanic. Volunteer with Ojai Trees. And I came today because Jim Selman told me there'd be muffins.
They're gluten-free, by the way. They're going to get the apples. I'm Kathy Nolan. I've lived in the valley for maybe close to 40 years. I've always been an activist, even when I was very young and always involved with the environment. I'm an Ojai City Planning Commission. I chair the Complete Streets Committee, and I'm also a founding member of the Tree Committee. It's an advisory board for the city, everything related to trees. And just recently became a board member of the Ojai Valley Green Coalition. And I'm passionate about our community. I'm passionate about the planet, and I'm here to work on anything with adaptation, mitigation, consider me part of the group.
Jeff Otterbein, been in the Ojai Valley for a long time, since '85. I love this place. And I like our planet, I like the animals. So we gotta do something. And I like bicycles. I like to promote bicycles, get kids on bikes, so I work for Bike to School Week and try to get kids on bikes and see if we can make some safer routes. And we got a lot of work to do, and I'm really happy to have this group here and all of us here. Thank you very much.
I'm David White. I was born in Scotland, and I visited Ojai. It was the first place I visited in America in 1985. It was a big fire here in '85, but it was pretty interesting. And I moved here in '88. And I've been pretty much working with youth and environmental issues since I got here. Founding board member of Keep Assessment Wild. I set up school garden programs for Food for Thought Ojai. I currently run a watershed education program through Ventura Land Trust called Once Upon a Watershed. We connect kids directly to their own watershed. I also run a non-profit called Center for Regenerative Agriculture, and that's promoting the techniques of regenerative agriculture, which are nature-based climate solutions. And that's really important to me, and primary for me is connecting kids to the vital spark of nature.
Hi, good morning. My name is Lucas Seibert. I'm the new community development manager for the city of Ojai. If you have that's new car, I don't want to say car, maybe a new bike smell. Eventually it'll wear off, but right now it's have been in a local government for roughly 20 years. Grew up in Iowa, was born and raised in Iowa, and then packed up all my stuff after I finished my thesis with Iowa State University and in a car. Moved out here and worked for the city of Claremont for about 11 years. Dipped my toes in Riverside, the city of Riverside, for about a year, and was with the city that I was living in for about 2 years, the city of Laverne, and then saw this as an opportunity. I've known about Ojai since my grad days. We studied Ojai, and even though you're small, understand that you're known across the United States. So anyway, thank you. Consider me a sponge. I'm absorbing the information as we go along.
Gloria Valladolid, I live in Myers Oaks. I'm a retired high school teacher and administrator, and I'm a client of California Solar Electric. And I'm a fanatic, like I don't take baths all summer because we don't have water. And I write
Unfortunately, it's not
letters.
summertime.
I write letters to politicians and to the Ojai Valley News.
Thank you. He does great letters.
Any city council?
Michael Greenawalt, I've been a long-term resident of the valley, and I don't come with any credentials relative to this issue, but I am here to see what I can do individually to shift my lifestyle away from the problem and more towards the solution.
I'm Vicki Peters, and I moved to Ojai in the early 80s. I too was a founding member of Keep Assessment Wild, and I came to Ojai mainly for the hiking trails. And I love the conservation ethic, but the thing is that I'm really seeing is that conservation isn't just something that we can appreciate and value, but actually our lives depend on it, and we're starting to see more of that as far as what's happening as the consequences of climate change. So about 10 years ago, I went back to school in Northridge, and I started riding the train to commute from Ventura to Northridge. And I really, even though I'm not commuting as often now, I feel like transportation and transit is a big issue as far as climate change, even within Ojai. And also the waste stream, as far as how much we throw away, because we're consuming so much. And I love Jane Fonda for saying she's never buying another thing. So I'm really concerned about how much trash we're, creating. So I'd like to see more conservation and recycling.
I'm Adam Petzlancias. I go to Ojai Valley School, where I'm the day student representative. And then I also write for the school newspaper, which is, I think, mainly why I'm here. And then I'm also the vice president of the Ojai Valley Green Schools Coalition, which is easily confused with the Green Coalition, it's just a word difference there. But we're just a group of kids trying to get involved and make some change and do something that's a little bit more accessible to teens. So. Good.
Thank you. Claudia, do you guys want to come?
Hi, my name is Claudia Boyfire. I'm here as a resident of the Ojai Valley. I've been here 8 years. I'd like to live here another 80. I love the valley. I'm also a parent. I have a daughter here at Nordoff. She's also a student leader on environmental climate issues. Is part of the Green Schools Coalition. And I just really feel strongly, I'm very concerned about climate change. I feel strongly as a parent that we can't leave it to the kids. I'm grateful for all the movement and the protests that the school strikes have been spearheading, but I feel as a parent I need to step up too and stand up for the future generations. So I want to see what I can do or contribute in my community. I don't have any particular credentials. That's great. Oh, and I have an electric car, which I love. An electric car.
My name is Paul Weiss, and Karen and I, we've lived in 4 different cities within Ventura County all our married life. We currently live in Ventura, and we're working to get Ventura to declare a climate emergency and then come up with plans and ideas, so that's why we're here.
Hey. My name is Carrie Ace, and I have been an activist for all my life, but most recently I've been doing a lot of work with groups like Surge, showing up for racial justice, Food and Water Watch, Cause, and then particularly right now it's relevant that we are active with the 350 Ventura County Climate Hub. And so I'm sort of representing them. And just recently I became a representative on the Climate Justice Network for the Ventura 350 group. So I'm becoming more and more active along those lines. And I was one of the parent or adult supporters of the Climate Strike 805 youth who put on the big strike in Ventura. And since then I've been very supportive of youth in the area who are trying to get things rolling in this regard. But there are a lot of adults who are wanting to help too, so it's very multi-generational. And we are here today to hear what's going on and to be inspired, because we really have been pushing since September or before to try to get the city of Ventura to declare a climate emergency, for goodness sake. And then beyond that, beyond the symbolism of that, to actually put something in action or create a means of becoming active to face the emergency we're facing and work toward mitigation and resilience and all of that. So this evening, I have 2 city council members coming to my home for dinner because I just go up to them and say, how about coming over and talking so we can get this done? And I have some youth there too, so yeah, thank you.
Would you all mind introducing yourself too?
Luis Gomez, work for the city of Ojai, city manager's office.
He's going to start buying organic cookies.
City Hall.
We couldn't hear you, I'm sorry.
Jeremy Asper, audio video guy, City Hall.
All of our live streams you watch in Channel 10, he
does that, yeah.
James Long, IT, City of Ojai.
Thank
He
you for
gives
being
the
here.
tools to the other guy to do it.
Did we have somebody else just come in?
Charlie.
Yeah, okay, would you mind just introducing yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Darlene Patrick. I'm Jimmy Sullivan's wife.
Thanks for coming. Say some more about yourself.
I was late. Wow, I'm happy to be here, and I see a couple faces that I know, and I'm delighted with that. I'm excited about what this city is doing and potentially creating for a model for other cities to follow. And I'm just sitting willing to listen and learn from everyone.
Everybody introduce yourselves, nobody else? What a group.
Yeah.
Well, good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Jim Selman. My role here is not to lead the workshop, but to be more of a facilitator. There were two words that Michelle used when she was introducing the day. One word was unprecedented, another word was conversation. In one sense, the committee itself is an experiment that was empowered and created by the council, and each member of the council appointed one of us to really ask the questions about how do we even think about or approach something as massive as climate change. And as a consequence, in our meetings and our kind of getting here today, we really realized that one of our primary roles is to listen. And that's one reason why we created today, is an opportunity to listen and participate in a dialogue with you in terms of having a conversation about what can be done to impact and have some influence in terms of the larger climatological conditions that we're in. We very much agree with you that there's a lot of it's important that we not get into a reactive, sloganeering kind of conversation or kind of response, but really to think about what are the causes, what can we do, and is it going to make any difference? We very much said, the climate is not something that cares what our point of view is. Climate doesn't care what we think. Another thing about the whole idea of what we're trying to deal with here, Einstein had a quotation which I loved, which was that we have created problems that we cannot solve thinking the way we thought when we created them. And so right off the bat, we're very suspicious of any kind of automatic, traditional kinds of knee-jerk responses. So we're actually here to involve ourselves and participate with you in an inquiry and an investigation and exploration, first step really, in terms of opening up possibilities that may not even be in our minds at the moment, to begin to invent a different relationship with and perhaps understanding of what's going on in a way that we could actually participate in creating something. Another thing that I think is very important, and it was really part of why I even came to Ojai, is that Ojai really does have a community vibe. But a community includes everybody. Okay, everybody in the room here is pretty much on the same page, I think, in terms of concerns, and many of you have committed your lives to having some kind of an impact. But really, I'd like us, at least mentally, to try to include the rest of the community that's not here in the room. One of the things in my work that I've landed on is that only the individual makes a commitment. That's the one thing that only individuals can do, is create commitment. We cannot commit. I can commit, you can commit, and we can line up our commitments together. But we need other people to fulfill our commitments. And so at least from our committee's point of view, we're really trying to approach the issues not just from the issue, but from the point of view of if we're going to have any kind of an impact, it needs to be a consequence of the whole community participating in implementing whatever changes and whatever kinds of things need to happen. So I invite us to be inclusive today, in our minds at least, as well as participate in an open way to explore and then create what we can do. Now, I can't remember your name? Kevin said one of the things we need to think about is what is the problem and what are the sources of the kinds of emissions that we're dealing with. And Steve, I'm going to ask you to kind of maybe kick off the thing by just orienting us to the size of the problem. And Steve's got the credentials to say so. So why don't you give us a little orientation to what's the issue and what's the game we're playing and what's the name of the game? Because that's really the starting point for a bigger conversation.
And Kevin, I appreciate your question and agree with you, certainly in the broader context. Just a little bit about, a little more elaboration on the distinction between mitigation and adaptation. When we set up as a committee, we're commissioned by the county, the city council here, and so the focus is going to be on things that the city within its jurisdiction can actually accomplish. Clearly, there's a broader concern throughout the valley. So one of the things that we have up, and you can take a look at it, is a zoning map for the 4+ square miles of the city of Ojai. There are only actually a couple of sections that are agricultural, that are within the jurisdiction of the city. We're surrounded by agriculture, but there's really relatively little agriculture. So what we chose to do during this first 6-month period, in order to have some degree of focus and come up with recommendations that the city council could actually adopt or implement, was on mitigation. And I mean, you had raised the issue of it's not just the emissions of the gases, but it's recapturing those gases. Mitigation is both of those. So mitigation is focused on reduction of the factors that cause climate change and global warming. Adaptation is something we're going to have to do regardless of what happens, whether we're successful or not at mitigation. So we decided to narrow our focus for this initial period on mitigation measures, that is retention of CO2 through our biosphere, as well as reduction of our emission of gases. So in terms of grounding this, one of the things we tried to do is what kind of data are available and what must we do to get there. So if we look at this pie chart, which comes from the California Air Resources Board, the charts that we're using are going to come from government agencies with some degree of respectability. So if we look at the current pie chart of emissions that are in the state of California, transportation dominates, and that's going to be the burning of fossil fuels in transportation sources. Industrial applications, which we don't have an awful, we've got CESP in Ojai, we're not a real big industrial emitter. Electricity, a chart here. The agriculture, a lot of the emissions related to agriculture are from belching ruminants. So it's not, this is not, again, within the boundaries of the city of Ojai, it's not a great big factor. So what do we have to do? What we need to do is shrink this pie as much as we can over time and as quickly as we can. And if we focus on something like transportation, we heard a lot of conversations about bicycling, EV and EV advocacy. If we all of a sudden went to electric vehicles, this 40% would collapse and the size of that pie would drop down dramatically. Where we look at electricity, commercial and residential, the next biggest piece of Ojai's emissions come from our buildings. It comes from the heating and cooling of all of the buildings that we had here. When I started doing this work in Cambridge, Massachusetts in the 1970s, a major focus of energy was energy conservation, was making buildings more efficient, was adding thermal windows and things of that sort. We still can shrink the size of this pie by focusing on energy conservation and on things that get us as much as possible out of the use of fossil fuels for our heating and cooling activity. So if I move over here, this is what the Environmental Protection Agency puts up on its website. Still is not full of false truths and half facts. So this is a chart of the greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S. from 1990 through 2017. And you see that majority of that is in carbon dioxide. So that's the burning of fossil fuels. CO2 is a product of that. The IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, has said by 2030 we have to globally reduce our impact by 50%. So Phil White put this on the same scale. We have seen since about 2006 a slight decline, a very slow decline in the emissions of greenhouse gases in the US. Not nearly as fast as we need to get to the 50% goal by 2030. IPCC says if we don't get to this 50% reduction goal, we're in trouble. So that gives you a sense of how daunting the task is before us, that this is not something that we can just casually do as we've done in the past. We've really got to change the trajectory and go down in our consumption. So, and another point to remember is us as North Americans, we each have a footprint of about 20 tons of greenhouse gases per person every year. Globally, the average is about 5. So we're about 4 times greater consumers of and producers of greenhouse gases compared to the world as a whole. So we really, as a matter of moral responsibility, should be cutting down more than even this 50%. We have historically contributed to the problem. Now, one of the issues of CO2 is when we drive our fossil fuel car, that CO2 has a residence time in the atmosphere of over 100 years. Methane, which is a more powerful gas, is really gone after about 7 to 10 years. So even though it's a more potent greenhouse gas, its lifetime is shorter. But I think this is using an IPCC equivalent that now is out of date. So the methane figure should look larger in this context. So I'll stop there because I don't want to lecture.
When you're saying gas emissions by gas, what does
Speak
that
loudly
mean?
as you can.
When you're talking about these gas emissions by gas, are you talking gas from what?
Okay, so, and I didn't have a chart of this. So any fossil fuel. So it's coal, it's oil, it's natural gas. So it's the burning of a fossil fuel that has carbon in it, and it's the burning that produces energy, and the byproduct of that is heat, energy output, or CO2, carbon dioxide.
Okay, well, with methane emissions, you've got these emissions, but you've also got methane emissions from ruminants, cattle, and goats, and things like that. And you've also got the permafrost, which is melting up in the Arctic and the northern regions, which is a huge threat because methane is how many times more potent than CO2? 86 times more potent. It's extremely far more dangerous than carbon dioxide.
Yeah, right, and I'm actually using a factor of 100 these days, but
Okay.
You're absolutely right. Now, the primary source of methane emissions is still oil and gas production. And there was a very, very recent study, I knew it was taking place. NASA was doing flyovers over all of California looking for methane and methane leaks. If anybody wants, I can give you a link to the maps because you can look where the super emitters are in the Ojai Valley and throughout Ventura County. But it's the pipelines and the oil and gas production activities and what was the leak of the oil, the natural gas storage facility in Ventura. That was the largest accidental release that we've ever seen in history.
In the San Fernando Valley.
In the San, okay.
I just want to add that the permafrost is accelerating. You know, the release of methane from the permafrost heating up from climate change is accelerating. So we need to look at the broader picture of what are we doing for general climate.
Oh yeah, these are all interconnected. You're absolutely right. And the reason that the permafrost is heating is because globe otherwise is heating from all of the things that we're doing that contribute to that. When we were doing this work in the late 70s at Harvard, one of the things that we were hoping for is that some of the feedback loops, which the permafrost is, would lead us in the direction of reducing the impact of CO2 emissions. Every single feedback that we've observed since then has gone in the wrong direction. Things have been happening faster than we predicted at that time, and their consequences have been worse.
And I think it's also important that we appreciate that this is a global conversation and that there's lots of things globally going on, but from the point of view of the committee, we're trying to, particularly today, to focus on Ojai, Ventura, and the general things that we can have some impact on. So again, we want to be sure that we're clear that we're aware of lots of bigger things, but unless we have some connection to it, we're trying to sideline it. Yeah.
Yeah, Steve, I'd appreciate it if you could speak to the part where there's NOx emissions on that graph, and to what extent NOx emissions are tied to transportation, and also perhaps bring up what we are developing in terms of data about the CO2 emissions from the use of concrete.
Well, I think you can address both of those. I mean, concrete. Well, I didn't bring that chart, but I mean, concrete is a major producer of CO2 because a lot of energy has to go into the production of the concrete, and that's something that we can mitigate. I mean, potentially by building codes in Ojai, but it's a broader scale. Oxides of nitrogen are one of the primary emissions from internal combustion engines, including vehicles. It's the N2 in the atmosphere, which is what 80% of what we breathe is cleaved, and we've got oxides of nitrogen, which is a precursor for the famous Los Angeles smog that I spent most of a career studying. So I don't know what you wanted to get at with your question.
Those are helpful statements. The one other thing that's come up in the last year or so is how concrete production actually involves releasing geologic CO2. Because when you create concrete, the processes it goes through takes rock that has CO2 trapped in it. And we're talking rock. And it releases the CO2 from rock, not just from CO2 that was free when fossil fuels were created.
Right. And I mean, again, to follow up on Jim's comment, that's the sort of thing that we want to put on the panel on the side, because what we want to try to focus on are things, policies, ordinances, programs that the city of Ojai can implement as an example that will help to mitigate this issue.
And I think mitigation there, we'll talk offline.
Yeah.
But to follow up on this real quick, I think that the end goal is to also take our hard work in this community and pass it on to other communities. So we're creating a roadmap or a bicycle lane, however we want to talk about it, but we're basically creating something that can be passed on and spread and become kind of a viral.
And we're going to ask you in a minute to really focus on what you see as local sources of emissions. And so we're going to try to telescope this down to that, yes.
And let me tie on to what Jim just said about local emissions. We have a pie chart that Steve showed for California. This is the emission inventory for California, and Ojai is different. Ojai doesn't have heavy industry, so the piece for Ojai is going to be smaller, the proportion is going to be smaller. I want you to know that our committee recently went to the city council with a recommended action to develop an emission inventory for the city of Ojai, and the council approved that at its last meeting. Our proposal is to work with the county APCD to develop this, since they have the data on all the sources within the county. But while there are concrete and permafrost Methane is important and not to be ignored. Our main focus is still going to be on the transportation. What can we do in Ojai to reduce emissions in the transportation sector? What can we do with electricity? The council's already taken action on electricity by establishing the Clean Power Alliance to go to renewable electricity and bringing everybody into buying their electricity from the Clean Power Alliance will reduce that piece of the Ojai emission pie. We have buildings. We're in a building that had the heater on this morning, I believe, fired by natural gas. The heating of this building is contributing to those emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions from this valley, and converting that to a heat pump system can eliminate emissions associated with natural gas burning. Anyway, I wanted to throw that out. We need to develop this pie chart for Ojai, and we're moving in that direction, and the council has moved in that direction.
So I just wanted to say a couple things in response to what Steve presented and a little bit of what Phil's presented.
I'm just really worried that, are we able to pick up the questions?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Speak louder.
Yeah, speak loudly.
Behind you, so everybody hears you.
Talk like
I know,
this.
right?
Just loud is good enough.
I'll go to the front and address the whole room.
Yeah,
All right. So,
Stand up. Stand up.
all right. Steve, I'm sure you will corroborate this, and we've talked about this before, but this 2030 marker of 50% reduction is incredibly conservative. So the IPCC is backlogged in their data. They have 2 or 3 years, right, for which they have to compile the data, so all the reports are backlogged. They also include CCS, which is carbon capture and sequestration, into their models, which isn't being done right now on any significant scale. So it's also conservative in that sense. Scientists are conservative by nature. The IPCC is especially conservative by nature. Doesn't include the methane releases, doesn't include the tipping points, doesn't include a lot of positive feedback loops that are happening right now. So just foundationally, this 2030 is not something that we should keep in our head as like, oh, we have 10 years. That also ties into our cognitive biases, which cause us to lull. So I would put that, I'd say like 3 years, we need to get our shit together. So I want to say that. I also want to speak to this idea, which I really appreciated at first, of keeping our minds open, especially the committee, listening and being open. And I think the slogan that we need to keep in mind is outside the box. I've always said that at city council testimony, outside the box. And one of the outside the box things that came up in the original presentation here is agriculture in Ojai. So thinking outside the box means that we need to think about front yards and backyards. That's agricultural land in Ojai. And thinking outside the box means taking whatever dirt and whatever open land we have to create food, to sequester carbon, to use some of David's techniques. And I think we also really need an educational program for the community about this, because we're all here, we're all on board with this, but the rest of the people in Ojai, they'd freak out if we started acting outside the box. So I just want to say this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes?
I was kind of getting to the question you sort of asked, which was about disaggregating this, 50% and how much per person we use. Do you have any idea what it is in Ventura County per person?
Well, it's, I mean, us as North Americans, it's 20 tons per animal.
Yeah, I realize average, are we less or more? I mean, we also we are oil and gas, so we might produce more.
If you put credit on us for the oil and gas that is produced downstream, we're much worse than the 20 tons per year per capita.
Are we going to come up with the statistics you're talking about with a total amount of greenhouse gas that we're producing by sector? And then so that we'll have actual numbers to target so that we can see how we're achieving it?
That's been a goal.
Well,
Because otherwise, you're just,
Well, that is the goal, that we could go to the city council and say, okay, here's what Ojai is responsible for, and here's where you can affect it.
Can I get a point of clarification? When you say numbers, I think less important than the numbers, which as Jack pointed out, these are, some of these numbers, like a 50% reduction is, a hopeful target and is way behind the actual data. I was at the Institute for Theoretical Physics in Santa Barbara for 24 years, and I, dealt with these, some of your peers greatly. So my point is, we need sources of the greenhouse gases, not just the numbers. We need to be able to inventory so that we can target, and that's not to, shame and blame anybody, but damn it, if there's a fire happening, you need to know where the source of it is to get at stopping it. And just to clarify,
Yeah, we're gonna open up that statement to the whole room in a few minutes, so.
So just one more thing is that methane is a big deal, and it's not coming from cows. That was kind of a misleading thing that has been put out in the media.
Bill and kids are,
What's coming out now is all these leaks, as you pointed out later. So I just wanted to clarify that we need to get at this source.
Yeah, again, just in terms of how we're planning today, is after the opening here, we're gonna ask each of you at your table to start building your own experience in terms of those specific sources.
Right.
And then we'll go do some things with that.
I would like to respond to this chart here. This is not magic. This is not the official worldwide goal. This is a number that has been put out there. And maybe, yes, it should be down here. I think the point of this chart is that, we're up here and we need to get way down. This is an emergency. This is serious. You could argue about should this be 40%? In the county general plan, the consultant came up with 41% by 2030. There are others saying, it should be 0 by 2030. I think the point is we really need to reduce emissions and pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere with sequestration as quickly as we can. It is an emergency.
Yep.
This is not magic. These are not hard numbers.
Carrie hasn't had a chance to talk. Carrie.
I wanted to say that in everyone's efforts to imagine and be innovative, to come up with solutions, please always keep in mind that you need to consider beyond your own lived experience and how you see your life changing. We really have to look at frontline communities, disadvantaged populations that aren't well-resourced, and how all of our solutions have to include the fact that they can't just willfully get an electric car, or they can't just willfully do one thing or another, because there's just not the resource or the ability. I mean, we're talking about needing to incorporate policy changes and other substantial changes that help all the people who desperately want to and are most impacted by all of this, bring those changes to you know what I'm saying? So it's enough for us to give lip service, for instance, to inclusion, but we really don't have a huge population here of people who are most harmed by this climate situation we're facing. So I just wanted to make the plea to please keep that in mind.
Robin?
Michelle, I just wanted to say that, Steve, there's that secret emission. It's called Bentley Flare that's going 24/7 that we can't see but is up there behind Persimmon Hill. So let's be sure that we count that too. Not sure what it counts for, but it is there. We do have wells up there. It's 24/7. We lost that battle with the county. Still fighting that battle, Bill, to stop their trucks.
I know.
Okay.
But let's remember that.
One more, and then we're gonna.
Okay, I have a concern that we have framed it in a particular way, and I know you guys try to be pragmatic and everything, but I think that if you want to focus on this and on the transportation and the issues from that and the emissions from that, at the same time in the next 6 months, we should have a community education program where we are talking about the larger impacts and what individuals can do beyond just this, because there's a lot more to it. And that thing, if the West is at least four times, creates at least 4 times the emissions as the undeveloped world or the poorer segments of the population. We should triple our reductions or quadruple our reductions, and the time frame we should be looking at is 3-year. It doesn't feel like a climate crisis or emergency when we're talking about 2030. You know, we've got to look at the next few years, what can we do now?
That's great. And by the way, we've had conversations amongst ourselves, and education, for example, is a big area for concern. But again, what we want today is your view in terms of getting all of those kinds of ideas articulated. And so what I'd like you to do is, at your tables, let's take a few minutes. And the question is, what do you understand, or what do you see or believe are the sources of emissions in Ojai? And maybe extend, if you go to the red line on the map, which isn't a lot bigger, there's some peripheral areas that may be close enough for thinking. But primarily staying focused in Ojai, what are we producing, and what could we do something about if we're going to do it? Now, there are obvious resource concerns no matter what happens, and no matter what we propose. So we're not ignoring or blind to the need for practical concerns, but we don't want to start from the practical, or we'll never get to the possible. We'll never get to the larger, out-of-the-box kind of thinking. So let's begin. One more? Yes.
So I have a question about that. So the emissions, and Steve maybe can confirm this. I heard that the air quality issues in the Ojai Valley, 30% of the air pollution in the valley is because of the shipping in the Santa Barbara Channel.
Part of it is, yes.
30% is what I heard.
Because it gets created out there, and then the Ojai Valley is a closed-in valley. The air doesn't flow over the mountains.
So obviously
it gets pushed up into our valley and sits here. If you've ever been here in the summer when we had our inversion days,
we're not going to do air quality.
It's ugly.
So there's emissions, right?
Right.
And that's an emissions thing, that's bunker fuel they're burning, and that's coming into the valley, right? So it's just.
The scope is more the emissions that we're creating here. So the
in the valley
we're
itself,
causing to happen.
And by the way, we're not ignoring the air quality as a concern in the valley. We're just saying that's not the climate conversation per se.
Yeah, maybe we're having trouble with that, though.
Yeah, that's a
having a lot of trouble with
quality and emissions.
That's why we're writing it down. We're not ignoring it, and we're not arguing about it. We're just trying to get enough clarity and focus so that we can get the conversation.
Yeah. But I get it about, it's emissions in the Ojai Valley.
But in context, in context.
In the Ojai Valley, what I would say to your emissions is, I grew up here, been here since I was 5 years old. They used to have smudge pots on the cold winter nights when it got freezing.
Yeah.
They'd have kids go out there and light smudge pots, and all the orchards in the whole valley turned into black haze. And you get up in the morning and you'd have black goo all over you from all the smudge pots going. And that was a daily thing as long as it was cold. Then, of course, the smog from the 70s came in. That was a lot of it was here in the valley because the way the valley is situated. Now, as we're talking about, our other concerns have moved elsewhere. The cars coming in the valley, how many cars come in the valley every day? 50,000 cars a day?
Right. A lot because of tourists, yeah.
It's a crazy number.
Look at the traffic.
Those items obviously are affecting the valley. Here locally, what you could do as far as I would be concerned is your water situation would be a key component. The animals that you have here in the valley, horses, create a lot of waste, and that waste has to be dealt with locally and mitigated locally. It creates air quality issues, dust quality issues. Horses consume major amounts of water. Yes, they give you enjoyment, but they don't give you anything else.
Manure is valuable.
They can be, and they are a component of the valley.
Yeah, okay. Randy, you, and then we're going to do it at our table.
I just want to suggest to all of you that your comments are thoughtful and are needed, but if we don't focus on what's happening at each of our tables and providing the information that this group needs, we could be here every week for the next 5 years and do the same talk about it. We need to stop talking about, we need to start getting into the nuts and bolts that we feel affect us, or we're not going to get anywhere. So I appreciate the comments, but we need to get back. Jim, you need to take it.
So with what you're asking, there's two parts to it. One part is emissions created within the city limit. The other part is what the people and the lifestyle of the people in this community do that adds to emission creations. This community and the people in it, because they are so affluent, are able to travel, probably at the level of the top 5% on the planet.
And that's
So how do you want to cope with that?
Well, and I'd like to put that as one of the conversations at your table. Try to be as specific as you can.
Okay.
And every table I'd like you to work on, staying on the question, what is Ojai producing, or what is the source of emissions that you could attribute to Ojai that would be inside the scope of what we're trying to deal with here? It doesn't mean it's not other things that need to happen, it just means this is the question. So that would be part of an answer that you could work on at your table. So every table, we're just going to take a little while to do this, and then we're going to continue the group conversation.
Table discussion, what's the end result of our discussions?
You're going to stand up and say what your table came up with in terms of answers to the question, what are the sources of emissions that you could attribute to Ojai?
Jim, I'd like to add one thing to that. Consider yourself as a city council person, and we have 3 of them here in the room. What can the city of Ojai City Council affect? It can affect what's within the city limits, but it can also affect what's beyond. And I think that we all should be thinking, what can the city of Ojai do to affect this problem, including affecting beyond the city?
So we're going to take 10 minutes to do this at your tables. You can
So the sources, not solutions, just the source of emissions. We'll get to solutions in the next phase. So that is a source of emissions, and that anytime you build I think it's important to identify that as a source of
People who walk on that boat
There are some that are better. Most of them are.
we're looking for allies.
So maybe in our building codes, let's use solutions, whatever. Yes,
You can sink that into
All right, everybody raise your hand. Bring your back. Okay, so everybody can hear what you did at your table. Is everybody here? Okay. All right, so let's now hear from each table. You don't have to have a single spokesman, but what happened? What did you see? What did you identify as the sources of emissions? Any table want to go first?
First, I want to say there was a little confusion because one of you said, "What can the city council? What can the city do?" And then when someone said, and then one of you said, "Just talk about the sources." So there wasn't clear. So we had two conversations going on about the sources and solutions.
Well, we want to have both conversations, but we didn't intend to have them at the same time.
I figured that was the case, but I'm saying that's not what happened.
Okay, well, our bad. Okay, but let's hear from your table. What did you come up with in terms of sources of emissions?
Sure.
And then,
sure.
And we're gonna capture them as best we can. Don't use this thing. This is a mess. Just use this one.
Single-family student drop-off at schools. And I won't say a solution. I'll leave it at the source.
Again, this is not about agreeing and disagreeing. This is about, looking at what we think and what we see and what our experience tells us.
And relating to the concrete that's way over there, the number of large construction trucks, which includes cement mixers. Food and product delivery trucks.
No, every other one.
Food delivery.
For efficiency, she's going to get every other one.
We're just going to go either
Okay. Food and product.
You getting that one?
Food and what?
Food and product delivery trucks. Building emissions.
Slow down. Okay.
Well, since they're doing every other one, two people there.
What do you mean building emissions? Can you clarify?
Like air conditionings and the heat and what's used, how
Heating and
handling all
cooling
the
of buildings.
emissions from environmental control in buildings. Even though there's a new policy, the two-stroke landscape equipment. Natural gas.
So Phil, that's yours.
Or maybe natural gas leaks. Has to do with assessment of the infrastructure. And this is a larger picture one that I was thinking about, and that's the overall disconnect we have from nature and our role as stewards, that as a root cause.
Good. Let's go to another table.
Can we just finish?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're not done.
You have 3 more pages, right?
No, just one more. And this may not be the right verbiage, but consumer habits, how we drive to Ventura to buy things versus buying local.
You're coming into our territory.
I feel like they should all get.
Let's hear from everybody.
There's one more thing that was rather a large nexus, and that is related to getting out of Ojai, and what the city can do is to have a permanent farmers market that would allow people to understand that they don't need to get out of Ojai. And
Solution.
That's a solution.
It may or may not be, but the point is that this idea that we have to get out of Ojai, that there are things here, but it's something that the Ojai City Council can do. And food gardens is the other thing that is, yes, it's a solution, but we were asked what Ojai City Council can affect.
Yeah, we'll get that again, yes. Okay.
If we go through in sequence with both,
Yeah.
efficient?
Yeah.
So, you have to go next.
We can't hear you over here, brother.
So, the first thing that came up is short distance driving in town, where you go a few blocks just because you don't want to walk and/or you don't walk or ride your bike downtown. Long distance commutes from residents going to LA and other long distance places. The part where the housing costs are so high here is forcing workers to have long distance commutes into the valley. So that's an affordable housing issue and a way to figure out how to mitigate the part where everybody who doesn't work here has to come from someplace
So
else.
long distance commutes is the problem, is the source.
Long distance commutes by residents versus long distance commutes in by workers. Two separate issues, totally different policies.
Got it.
High emission vehicles, the number of trucks, which is touched upon, so we're reinforcing that. Concrete in construction, including both new and remodel work. Every time you take concrete out, you are throwing away the resource that was created from the emissions. Not using bikes or walking, which of course is related to the short distance driving. Doing business outside the valley versus shopping locally. Validating your point, might be a little bit more
Russell,
precise.
what was the one before this last one?
Not using bikes or walking, and then doing business outside the valley instead of locally.
Let's add carpooling to the not.
Yeah, lack of
That's a
carpooling.
solution.
Lack of carpooling.
Oh, that's a solution, okay.
Just saying.
Too many cars in the valley. There's a case being made that the more cars you got, the more you're going to drive. Using trucks for non-work driving. We have people that have massive trucks that are not being used for work. Sometimes they're used for work once or twice a week, but they're driving them all the time. So, not enough bike usage. Oops, that's coming up a lot. Flare emissions.
Flare emissions, yeah.
Oh, okay, the bike usage issue is because of the unsafe road conditions. So the unsafe road conditions are one of the reasons why people are not biking or walking. Flare emissions from oil fields. We have flares are designed to be emergency releases of natural gas, but we got one 24/7, and we're surrounded by them. The green waste management issue is a problem because our green waste has to be trucked outside of the valley and is not processed locally, which brings in solutions such as composting.
Waste disposal.
Gas appliances. Everything that burns gas in our houses is creating emissions.
Got it.
Oh, and one of the things that we didn't necessarily get consensus from in the group is the issue of air travel. There are studies that show that air travel is not only one of the highest per capita per mile modes of transportation, it is also being used to a much higher extent by people who have the kind of wealth that people in this valley have. And I can tell you, my friends in this valley do 5 to 10 times as much air travel, 10 to 20 times as much air travel as I do.
I knew we needed to shut that airport down here.
Well, if it's the judge that's doing it,
Okay, well, I'm not done. Can I'm part of this table.
Of course, go for it.
Yeah, I would say lack of tourism management, because the city could impact tourism that a lot more.
Got it.
Lack of climate change education, the city needs to get with the school board and bring units into the school, and that would include just everything we're talking about. I mean, and that would include maybe in adult education as well as, age-appropriate climate change education. We lack that. And then the city council and the staff of Ojai needs to lead by example, and they're trying. They're going to get some electric bikes, but we can do a lot more with the city property.
Thank you.
All right, interestingly enough, we had a lot of very similar things, so I'll go through mine fairly quickly. Number one.
You can repeat them, but we'll just check them.
Yeah, and I'm just going to kind of run through it quickly. Number one, we had vehicle emissions with cars, so there were the tourists, the school driving, commuters, errands, work, small-scale community driving. The other thing we looked at was driving trucks for trash and waste, which includes manure, packaging of materials, for example. We also we discussed the closing of Ojai Valley Organics, which was a source for green waste management within the valley. Now, when all the landscapers are wanting to haul the material, they've got to go out of the valley, so there's more driving. And when they want the equipment or the material, we have to get it now from out of the valley and bring it back in. So it's kind of a three-way, the material itself, and then the increased trucks and what have you.
That didn't get resolved? I thought that got resolved.
Oh, maybe it didn't, maybe we didn't know about it, but we didn't think that it did. So, and then the other one was deliveries, and I mean, it's actually food and products in and out of the valley, and also for construction. We also brought up oil and gas production and leaks in the flaring, and then the built environment, construction methods and materials, heating and cooling, energy efficiency. We also looked at landscape, and even though we know there's not ag directly or very little of it in the city limit, even though we've changed our two-stroke engine use electric, there still is lower dust, and then the use of pesticides used in landscape actually decrease the carbon sequestration in the soil. And then the other one was the loss of trees. That is a reduction in carbon sequestration, and that could be somewhat data-driven too. We can look at. We've got some information from back in the 50s. Our natural forests being decreased, but also just in the landscape. So that was generally what we had.
Soil. Michelle.
What did she say about soil?
Soil, she said the pesticide use decreases the soil.
Yeah, carbon sequestration, yeah.
I know, just add soil, because soil is a big part of the soil.
Yeah.
Okay. Soil degradation.
Anything else on the table? Okay.
Lack of education.
Jennifer?
Students.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, another table?
Great.
Yeah, we got it.
All right, I think our table, I think we covered, it sounds like we're covering a lot of, we're talking big picture transportation, and then I would say building emissions, so both of those topics I think affect. For us, we actually focused on, I would say, 3 questions. Bigger questions that obviously get funneled down. One is, how can we create incentives to encourage change? I think that was a question that we went around and discussed. And then, how do we deal with our legacy use of such resources, right? And then third, can we demonstrate and encourage that change, right? So it's taking those pieces and bringing it down into something that's tangible. We're talking about, I guess the question was, what are the sources of emissions created in Ojai? And I think we're looking at here to here, right? But obviously,
Save those thoughts, because we definitely want to incorporate those in the next exercise as well. And I really want you to bring those back up again.
Yeah, that's what we got.
That'd be great.
And we talked about traffic and cars idling up and down the highways, especially weekends, and supporting transit, the importance of supporting. For example, I heard a rumor that the trolley might not be funded, but according to Randy, the trolley is not under, okay, being considered for, the trolley drivers are telling people that, so they need to.
Okay. Very good. Is it? Do you have any?
Yep, I do.
Either one.
Okay, I'm going to read everything. Tourism, the promotion of our community as a
Go a little bit
tourism.
slow so that they capture.
Tourism, all the cards that brings in the promotion of a tourist economy, lawns and landscape instead of food, cars and trucks.
What did you say?
Lawns and landscape in place of food. A convenience economy or mindset where it's just more convenient to use a throwaway cup or something like that. Cars and truck travel, new materials for construction and projects. School transportation is something that's very doable. Diesel trucks, out-of-valley service vehicles such as UPS and fix-it vehicles, 2 and 4-stroke engines, they consume 300 times what a pickup uses per hour. A lack of a carpool website, leaf blowers, pesticides, heat, gas heat, our societal values of consumerism and convenience, waste, ignorance, disabled person vehicle occupancy, water heaters,
Focus on.
so I got the water heaters, use up natural gas, showers, natural gas. These could both be solar or heat water 24 hours a day. Vehicle horses, home and renting, home and heating constructions, remodels,
We just put humans.
drivers, air travel, lack of social incentives and leadership, wildfires, plant sequestration of CO2 that affects that. Are our trolleys electric or not? We should have electric trolleys, the Ojai Valley Inn. Restricted laws protecting the existing trees so they can't be cut down. Consciousness, education, dryers.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna have dryers.
And appreciation that the homeless who use the least amount of resources and low-income people who use a lot less than people who have a lot of money and consume. I may have missed a few, but I think I'll let it go at that.
Okay, we're gonna just say the same thing, so.
Okay, say loud so you include everybody.
Okay, the economy of tourism that drives our city's financial coffers encourages lots of traffic in and out of the valley. The idea of concrete, there was a new house that was just built and had concrete poured all the way from stem to stern, rather than permeable or other kinds of surfaces that could be encouraged. Or, and then the idea, we're trying to think about what the city has control over. The city doesn't have control over everything, but the landscape guidelines that could promote urban agriculture and have ideas for trees and other kinds of plants, food. So urban agriculture in the landscape guidelines. Energy efficient standards, like what are the energy efficient standards that we should all be striving for? And then the big one for all of this is education. What kind of education? I don't understand what methyl this is and carbon, the idea that there should be a primer for everybody that's written at the 12th grade level that we could all understand and share with our kids and our families, to me, is really basic. And I can't speak about this stuff, I'm not a scientist, but having that education seems really important. And then the last one, which has to do with pesticides, you know, we're surrounded by citrus growers, and all the citrus growers are applying their pesticides using mineral oil. The mineral oil that all of those trees are now being sprayed with is infiltrating into our community at a certain level. I don't know if you know how to measure that, but that oil, the mineral oil in the pesticide sprays is the highest chemical that's being used for citrus right now, and we're surrounded by it. Oh, and then we also talk about food and product delivery, and then oil seepages. Oil seepages in Upper Ojai, where we have oil seeping out of the ground. Don't know what that impact is.
I wasn't at the table when they talked, so I was talking to the student, but I had two two big ones, I think. One is affordable housing, because one of the biggest causes of community is lack of affordable housing in the community. The other one is, who's not here, which is the school system. I mean, it's in the Ojai Valley, city of Ojai, and look how much we kind of referred to them, education, going to schools. And as far as I know, they don't have a climate reduction mitigation strategy for the school system. It seems like they should be part of it.
We are working on that. It is being worked on.
Okay, well.
Okay, so let's keep going. We're just looking for the stuff. We're not working on the solutions yet. Okay.
I'll start and then.
Sure.
I'm going to try to summarize a lot of things, and that's integrated, economically integrated localism. Because think about all the different ways we've been getting across that, that's associated with greenhouse emissions. Affordable housing so people don't commute so much. Being able to provide local services so we don't get the parade service trucks so much up from the valley. The city, I think, has already started looking at what we can do if we can directly lease or control that organic site, the Baldwin site, for everything from green waste processing to maybe organic, maybe food. Why couldn't we have a proper digester there? Anytime that everything has to leave the valley, process and be brought to the valley. So that's what I'm going to just summarize, economically integrated localism. Okay. Now, broadband, right? Why do we need broadband? So more people in the heavy digital content industries that may want to work here could live here and work here. Not just, a lot of people that live here want to work here, but they have to leave literally for the infrastructure that's lacking in things like broadband. So this is all part of integrated localism, is the way I'm trying to summarize things. And then this gentleman has some excellent ideas about, I know we weren't supposed to talk about water, but the energy aspects of a better integrated water system, both in and out.
Well, basically, in the Ojai Valley and the whole area, everybody flushes their toilets and it all goes down there. And it all ends up in the river again. And of course, that's the water that, once it's gone, it's gone. It's not coming back. It'll be thousands of years before that water ever returns to the valley. The Ojai, city of Ojai needs to somehow figure out how they can get their sewer treatment done locally here in the valley, and then have that water that they've created, the secondary flows off of that, reintegrated back into the water here in the valley, whether it's spread on spreading grounds in the upper end of the valley, which would be a really good idea, or however it happens. You cannot continue to flush 2 million gallons of water a day down the toilet, and that's about the average flow that leaves the Ojai Valley Sanitary. It just can't happen. That's the best of the best getting flushed away, quite simply. It's all the good stuff. So that's the one first thing, and then of course in the local zone of that, individual homeowners doing what they can on their properties. In the Ojai Valley, rainwater catchment systems are very easy to install normally. They're effective in a limited fashion. You have to understand that you may expend some money. You can't grow a big garden with rain catchment on a property because you can't hold enough water. But you could probably flush your toilet a whole bunch with that water. So that's a matter of being aware of what you can do and what you can do with it when you get it. Like Jim himself, he went to the expense himself as a private citizen of drilling his own water well on his property to try to be proactive and to take his demand off of the city's demand system. Now that's an expense that not everybody can do, but there are things you can do on your property in respect of water that will save the water for yourself and will in turn save the utility that has to try to bring it to you, which of course brings in all these workers we're talking about and all the monies and expenses and all those other things that go on with it. And at the same time, as far as I'm concerned, we need to be concerned with, we just had a big fire and Edison has come in and, as we all know, are replacing all this infrastructure in the valley. It is the most hideous, god-awful looking things they're putting up. You've seen some of those giant power poles they're erecting, the big fiberglass beasties with all the metal hanging off of them. As far as I'm concerned, the city of Ojai should make it a requirement that all future electrical entities be put in the ground. In-ground Edison is not hard to do. It's costly, but in the long term, as far as I'm concerned, are we really talking about long-term, because I'm thinking thousands of years. And if we want to be here for thousands of years, that's where we need to go. If we don't, we're just kidding ourselves. So, that's basically what we came up with here.
Great, thanks. Okay, so what I'd like to do then is everything here is the raw material for thinking about what can the city do. So that's the way at least I'm hearing. But every idea, everything you've observed, everything you've said, more or less is the raw material with which the city could approach change. Approach new policy, approach new thinking, approach new whatever we want to do. But I want us to now see if we can leap to the outcomes and leap to the solution. So, for example, if you could imagine that you were still here in, say, let's just be ambitious, let's just say 2025. That in 2025, if the city did everything it would think to do in a rational, quote, reasonable way, or approach it in a practical sense, not as limited by practical, but if they could put a full court press to produce the kinds of changes that would be needed, the solutions to some of these things. Maybe not all of them, probably not all of them, but at least the major ones. If you could say, if we could take on the major ones, what would, as a practical, simple, observable outcome, would the city look like? In other words, we're trying to get a picture in our mind of what would Ojai look like as a practical matter if we took on some of the major sources of the problem that are within the scope of the city, that we could in fact have a real impact, not only for our own benefit, but also perhaps, as some of you mentioned, as a voice to influence other jurisdictions and other parts of the community, beyond the community. So from that point of view, what would you say it looks like? This is what I call a conversation for possibility. So if anything were possible, what would you say it would look like? And be specific, not general. What would you be able to see going on as you drove into town if we were able to make the kinds of changes? Pardon me? If you bicycled into town or whatever.
Basically, there would be a giant parking area along 33, just below Casella.
That would be an example of what I want.
And then you could get out of the car onto the little electric train that comes up into the valley, and then you could travel around the valley and do what you want, either bicycles or electric. Return back down out of Casita Springs, get back in your car, get back on the freeway, and leave.
Yeah, so again, I'm asking you just to, you don't have to put the whole story of how it works, but basically say, we have some form of community parking, or satellite parking, whatever, then that would be an example of what we could say it could look like. But again, these are outcomes. Because the next question after we do this is going to be look at how can you create that reality. At the end of the day, even if you have a beautiful vision and a clear picture of the future, you still have to turn it into action. You still have to turn it into commitment. You still have to change. If you're going to make the change more than just an idea, ultimately we've got to say, how do we bring that vision into reality? And that's the next conversation we want to have after this. But first we want to get, what does it look like if we were successful?
So I'm just thinking of a vision. Right?
So speak to everybody.
All right, so
Stand up.
it's just a question to him. So I'm going to ask you the question because that's how it's coming out. So you want us to create a vision,
Yeah.
right? And how detailed?
Not great in detail right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Just enough so we get the general zone of what we're talking about. What is it going to look like? Yeah.
So, comment is, daily I'm reading what's happening in Europe, which is so far ahead in some of the areas than the U.S. And then there's models. Someone brought up in a meeting the other day about traffic. So there's a specific that, I think it might be in Germany, they're having all the cars park outside, and they're hopping on autonomous driving public vehicles on demand with an app. and you go, I'm here, and this electric vehicle is going driverless, and picking people up, it's a bus, and they're taking them into the city center. So I get that maybe too big for here. But it may not be. I looked at the price of electric trolleys, they're $450,000 each. So that's a chunk. But AI is really going quick. So if we do have parking outside, we can reduce by having electric autonomous.
So that's exactly what I'm asking, and again, I'm asking what you see. I'm not predicting any of this. I'm just saying, you've got satellite parking and some electrical commuter or trolley type system.
Right, but driverless.
Yeah, okay, driverless.
How are we doing this?
Everybody.
Or can we go to?
Yeah, I want to hear from everybody.
How about if we go to themes, so that we have a theme rather than disconnected topics, have a theme. So right now the theme is getting people around without so many cars. That's the theme. It's transportation, sustainable transportation, which is key in our tourist economy.
No, I agree with you, and all I'm saying, for purposes of trying to frame the next question of how do you get here, what we're talking about is how did you get to this? If you had 5 years to go from where you are now to the reality of satellite parking and driverless electrical trolleys all over town, how did it happen?
Well, there's federal funding.
Well, don't answer yet.
Right, but I want to expand on that. Because the economy is a big part of it. There's federal funding for bus systems.
That's right, yeah, that's right.
So it's not.
So again, I'm asking everybody to jump in here and participate in terms of it's your community. What does it look like in 5 years if you were able to produce the community reality that you say we're about to deal with the issues that we raised a minute ago? Yeah, yes.
I don't know, why don't we go into groups and do this, because I think this is incredibly broad and it can get very detailed, and I don't think it's efficient to do, and like this, we go into groups, and we talk about that, and then one person can present that.
We may do that, I was hoping we could do it as a group, but you may be right.
We're small enough. Yeah.
Okay, all right, you win. We're going to break into groups again. And the question is to try to draw a picture, a vision of what does the community look like if we've dealt with all of the kinds of climate impacting concerns that you just raised.
Based on emissions only, like we did previously?
Whatever you think. Whatever you say, but again, I'm not ruling out anything, because again, we're listening here, we're not looking for an answer. I mean, we don't have a pre-answer.
The previous year, we were focused on emissions.
Yeah,
we're going beyond just emissions.
Well, in terms of the question, we're wanting to keep it anchored in climate. Okay? So if you see that you have to impact housing in order to impact community, that's legitimate. But we do want to keep the focus on climate, recognizing there's lots of environmental concerns.
But just so we don't get into the confusion that we got into previously, you're looking for a vision, not specific solutions yet.
I'm assuming the vision anticipates a specific solution. But the question for now, you're right, the question for now is what is the vision? What does it actually tangibly look like if we're successful? That's the question for now.
For 2025, right?
Yes, 2025.
Okay.
And the next question after that, when we come back, is going to be the how. Okay? Got it?
So we don't need to know the how, I can write down flying
No.
cars.
Yeah. Yes?
I just want to make sure,
Okay.
I want to make sure that we've done a lot of this, some of us have done a lot of these kind of vision workshops. There's plans in place, and we would implement them, a lot of this would happen. But I also want to make sure there's going to be time where the climate emergency, you people are going to tell us what you've come up with in all your meetings. Will there be time for that at the end?
Well, I don't know.
That's why I'm here.
So,
We don't have answers yet, we just started.
Right, we're just getting started, so that's why we wanted to have this conversation now. We've been meeting and talking, but it's not like we have a list of recommendations yet. That's why we wanted to have this community engagement process to start getting ideas from a broader perspective and consolidating that and coming up. So we're not here to talk at, so just participate here.
I hesitate to talk with a group of people that are so knowledgeable about so many things, but it seems to me that there is a lot of information already in this room, and that we can immediately, instead of skip the vision stage, and immediately go to what are the solutions, because hidden within the solutions is the vision.
The vision is the solution.
Yeah, the vision is the solution.
Yeah, I'm just
So,
saying.
respectfully, I would like to hear from every table their specific ideas for their vision of what it's going. We don't have to create a universal vision.
That's exactly right.
That's what we're gonna do.
That's what I'm asking.
That's what we're gonna do.
That's the next stage. Because, you know, there's a quote for Einstein, as you pointed out, but it's probably not Einstein. He said, you know, if I was given an hour to solve the problems of the world, I would spend 55 minutes determining the problem and 5% on the solution.
Okay.
And, you know, I think we need to just keep that in mind as far as not jumping into our favorite solution, because, yeah, there are a lot of ideas here, and we need to get to that, but that was my understanding of the process.
The question is, look, what is your table's vision of what does it look like if we were effectively able to implement whatever we need to implement to make it happen? That's all.
All right, let's go.
I would submit.
I have a dream.
That the climate movement, biggest problem is being able to formulate a clear vision of what it takes to deal with this.
I don't disagree with you, but
And that the solutions that we all know, when combined together in a descriptive narrative, can become that solution. The solutions can become the vision when combined together in a descriptive narrative. We do not have the solutions on the table, so how can we combine the solutions together to create a descriptive narrative?
What I'm
The biggest challenges in the entire climate change movement.
what I'm inviting you to do is approach this question as if anything is possible.
Yes.
Okay?
Excellent.
Don't
This is
stop,
the
don't,
moonshot, like what, you know, right? The big- yeah.
if the future is up to us, what would be the future, what would the future look like? What's the vision for Ojai
Yeah.
if we were effective?
No limit.
And the chances are, if it matches my experience, we will discover perhaps solutions that we would never have thought of if we started the other way around.
Thank you.
I will see how we do.
Go.
Don't be limited by practicality.
10 minutes, see what we can do. 10 minutes. silent. Can't talk and raise your hand at the same time. Okay, thank you for that. All right, back table. We're just going to hear from each table now. So this is table number 1.
We didn't strictly follow the rules.
Being married to you, I'm not surprised.
And this list is pretty long, so bear with me. It is not in priority, and not one, just because it's read first doesn't mean it's the one that's the most important. Okay, number 1, ban one-time use plastic bags, cups, and styrofoam. When you said it, yeah. Number 2, restrict drivers who are not residents. They would be fined if they drive in Ojai without a special decal. A special decal for
Go slow,
Ojai
darling.
residents.
So what's the second one?
It's restrict drivers who are not residents. They would be fined if they don't have an Ojai decal on their car. Create a parking lot for tourists. In the parking lot, have it covered with solar panels for shade.
A permeable parking lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so just go slow enough that we can capture
What is
it.
the long list?
Well, we have a
I'll give it to you.
we have a big chart here.
Create parking lot for tourists, which is covered with solar panels and it's permeable. Have free electric buses or to tour town and pick up tourists. These buses are to be public transportation as comfortable and as convenient as a car, and public transportation 100% effective and carbon free. Am I going too fast?
Yeah, we got it.
Have a green waste facility for garden waste. Have a special organic waste for food waste. Have solar panels on all public buildings. Free fossil fuel, have Ojai being fossil free. The city creates a new oh, you're going to talk to this one?
The fossil-free, okay, let me just say that means obviously no wells, no flares, no materials that come from fossil fuels, 100% clean energy. Next, that the city needs to have an its own economic development commission. There's the one commission we don't have. We've been dependent on Ventura. We need to stop that. We need to have our own economic development commission that brings in clean energy companies and focuses on that, and that also helps us get away from tourism. One example, let me just say, Chris Wallen just came in, of a clean energy tourist kind of example is the Tierrasol Festival, which some of you probably went to last year, which was, in case you didn't know, a zero emissions festival. Zero footprint festival. There were no plastic, paper, anything. It was vegan. It was all clean energy. That's the kind of tourism what we want to have overall, and I think we need an economic development commission in the city that focuses on that. We can't lose it. And Ojai Day should follow that.
Okay, let's keep the list going. Go ahead.
Sorry, residents are educated to voluntarily reduce their footprint. Trolley is converted to electric. Eliminate all gas appliances.
Did you say anything about how you get all of the citizens to sign on?
Education.
We're not in housing.
Okay.
Eliminate gas appliances.
Education and leading by example, all of us, leading by example.
Okay.
Buildings are retrofitted to get maximum greenhouse gas reduction. Sustainable products and farm supply. All festivals are zero footprint. All building remodeling must use green products.
Wait, slow down. Did you get the last one?
What was the last one?
Zero footprint.
All festivals, zero footprint.
Can I interject? All festivals meaning all events.
Yeah, all events.
Yeah.
All building and remodeling must use green products. Net zero lifestyle and transportation globally.
Okay,
Anything
great.
else that I missed? Thank you, Jeremy.
Let's acknowledge each table as we go. All right, next table.
I did the vision thing as I'm coming into the valley, and I'm going past Petrochem, which is now a tourist car lot with solar panels, and that's charging electric vehicles to come up to the valley. And as you're going around the valley, there's a lot more EV vehicles. There aren't any ICE vehicles, internal combustion engine vehicles, because those have been banned from the city. So it's only electric vehicles. And we have, as I'm going around, I see solar charging panels for the electric bikes that are being used, because all the schools now, all kids have bicycles. Some of them are electric. We made that policy, because they all got computers, right? So we gave them all bicycles. And we've created a lot more eco-youth jobs. So as I'm driving around, I'm seeing that students are planting trees and are helping in eco jobs in front yards with food planting, and we've got a lot of fruit trees in front yards with edible landscapes, as well as the city having made all of their vacant lots available as community gardens, and we've got community orchards being planted around. And if it's not in community orchard, then it is pocket parks, which are just places for connecting to nature. So yeah, the solar panels are shading parking structures, and that's a local electricity grid. You know, at the schools, we've got school programs in place for Youth Eco Restoration Initiative.
Slow down, slow down.
Well, I'm gonna slow down. So plant nurseries at schools. We have much more integrated environmental education at schools. So we have kids who are learning about plants in particular, about how to maintain the bicycle fleet that the schools now have, how to repair their own clothing. I think that in terms of the city, also the mixed village use zoning has been increased so that we can have more people who are living and working in the same place, which cuts out commuting completely. Our trolley, as I go down the trolleys, which there are more of them, they're electric. There are more local organic vegetarian restaurants, which I really enjoy. Let's see, accessory dwelling units have been increased, so there's more granny flats, so there's more affordable housing, which increases the density of housing, which again reduces the amount of commuting that's going on. Our food gleaning is really in action, so that's supporting a midweek farmers market, because we have a lot of youth that are going around the fruit trees that have been planted in the valley and harvesting it, and then distributing that through Help of Ojai, community assistance program to low-income and homeless people. Our community demonstration garden has residential composting, which CRA is actually doing right now with its cycling compost collective on an electric bike on Sunday. Some of you may have had your compost being picked up by that. But the community demonstration garden is really a place where people can come and learn about sustainable food growing in their own community. What else? I think we're exporting our model with our YouTube channel, and that's really important that we demonstrate that to other communities and connect with other communities that are doing that. But really, it's like an ecotopia vision. You know, tourists are coming here because they can bicycle safely into town. And it's really, I think the main thing I notice is that there aren't any internal combustion engine cars on the road.
Very nice. Thank you. Okay, how about this table, Lucas?
I'm loving the deep dive.
This could be our first video on the channel.
So there is something that I noticed we haven't mentioned here, but it's probably something that I'm focusing on, certainly as we begin walking through the challenges that exist. And that's the general plan update. I think all the things that we're talking about here certainly can be discussed during that process with the communities. And that's starting very soon. So hitting on a lot, these first two tables really hit on some of the bigger pieces that we were talking about in terms of walkability and thinking walking first and using mass transit first. Even the overall going away, and it's this mindset, right? Like right now, it's this mindset of going away from. We've talked about this a couple different times at our table. going away from the vehicles that produce the carbon footprint and going to something that's much more eco-friendly, right? And that's kind of what we focused on here. The challenge that we were having at our table is the idea of, so you're still allowing for some, in Ojai, we're talking about funneling it right from here to here. This idea of a parking structure off-site and then everybody coming into Ojai, but for me, it's odd to think about a parking structure as a solution for the vehicles potentially coming in or the personnel coming in. Because what you're really thinking about is potentially creating solutions that are, here, but also solutions that create bigger picture here, right? So it's almost like going the opposite direction. You've got this, and then going to here. So I love the idea of a parking structure, but at the same time, I have mixed feelings regarding parking structures. It just creates this island, this kind of issue that we're talking about here in terms of climate change. So solution, but also kind of funneling it into anyway, that's the struggle that I was going through with that. Did you want to mention anything else with what we were talking about?
As far as the transportation and the mobility, we talked about how the trolley goes all the way around the valley, it takes about an hour. So maybe a more local route for downtown would help. And we also talked about mixed-use zoning and the fact that there are actually several retail leases on Ojai Avenue that are being given up, and retailers are moving out right now. And I think that's probably because the Oaks closed a couple of years ago, and a lot of those people are not coming into town to have a shop. So mixed use, it's possible to have more residential, commercial combined. And also density-wise, if we're going to have affordable housing, we may have to go up as well as closer, fewer setbacks. You might have to have higher, like 2-level residential.
2 or 3.
Yeah, 2 or 3.
It's that mindset change, right? If we're going to have affordable housing in this area, we're going to have it in percentages that work in tandem with developers. The third story, and I think you can get there with design, but those are bigger vision and potentially smaller vision.
Let's
Urban
keep it connected to climate.
Yeah, urban agriculture, I think, was a really good point that's been made a couple of different times. I know I've been at a lot of different conferences, and it's that the urban agriculture has been discussed, certainly at the residential level, in terms of using that space that's been used for water lawns for many years. So I think that's a really good point.
Good.
And the thing is, affordable housing really is connected to climate.
Yeah, as long as you keep that link, that's
Right.
Right, I think that's, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
How about this table over here?
Okay, we've got a bunch of different kind of disparate ideas. So one is having what was mentioned before is Ojai having its own sewage treatment plant, and that adjusting our water system so it doesn't rely on pumping, but takes advantage of gravity to move the water, if I'm describing this properly, but to move it downhill rather than using a lot of energy to produce the water. Second, affordable housing, which has already been mentioned. So at least a few hundred new affordable housing units by 2025, including housing for Ojai Valley Inn workers. I guess there was a proposal in the past to do that and then somehow got shut down, but that would be worth revisiting. And within the affordable housing, like really structuring the housing, like how like bike lanes and pedestrian access, like structured around the affordable housing to encourage walkability and non-vehicle use. Pedestrianizing downtown Ojai. So just shutting it down to cars, just having it for people who walk and possibly bike riders. And actually, I was thinking, I don't know how many people have been to Amsterdam, really the bikes there dominate. So the bikes have the right of way. So just really creating a system where like there's not this big wide space for the cars. The cars are kind of like restricted if we do have cars, and bikes have a huge amount of space, and so do pedestrians. So we really just make it so easy and safe to be a bike rider or a pedestrian, and kind of uncomfortable and inconvenient to drive a car. We have the parking area, which other people have also suggested, having that outside the city, especially for tourists, and then people take public transport from outside the city into the city. Having an education system for practical things such as rainwater capture, and other, gardening, other things that can help people become better stewards of the environment. Having like a rebate incentive program for local residents to encourage them to trade in their gas vehicles for electric vehicles, or drive smaller cars if we decide to keep cars in the valley. Having every decision that council makes run through a filter of just transitions, so always considering when we make decisions what the needs are of people who have the fewest resources and who are nevertheless often the most negatively impacted by climate change. So always thinking of things in that framework. Considering having some kind of a sort of solar powered, apparently there's some new technologies of solar powered photoluminescent lighting at night, particularly along bike paths and pedestrian walkways, so people can walk and ride their bikes at night, and yet it doesn't cause a lot of light pollution and doesn't require fossil fuels to power. Having a library, so this would reduce consumerism, having a bank or a library of tools and items that people can go to borrow stuff that maybe they need a bike trailer for their kid or whatever tool, so that they don't have to go out and buy it themselves, they can just borrow it. And then having every neighborhood or housing development has its own community garden, which has a mentor that works in the garden and helps educate people about farming and gardening and growing fruits and vegetables.
Good, thank you.
Okay. We've got, I'll just talk about the new things, which I hadn't heard yet. A recycling center that would include a place to get cardboard, manure, concrete, compost. So a recycling center that has all of those things that are regenerative, so we don't have to leave the area. What about if Ojai was the composting toilet capital of the world? And everybody had a composting toilet for their accessory dwelling unit, their ADU, and they could use their compost in their yard. They could actually, so what if we had worms and all of those things that taught composting toilet benefits and put it back into our soil. Let's see, the other one was carpooling hubs. So students would be able to go to a hub in their neighborhood and be picked up by parents who got, or other kids could go and pick up other kids. So that there was a approval process for everybody to be able to carpool with incentives for doing so. And then there was Unpave Ojai. What if we had an Unpave Ojai campaign so that everybody was encouraged to take out their concrete driveways and reuse them and recycle them and bring them to the recycling center? Changing social values. We talked about bullying kids who get rides to school from their parents without carpooling. That was a joke. But
I was just saying, when I was a kid, no one would go to school driven by their parents.
You had stuff out down the street.
No one.
And then,
What are you doing?
yeah, and then some kind of carpooling network. So if people need rides to Santa Barbara or the airport or Ventura, so a way to get shared riding as something that is a good thing. We also, this was a really good one, how about something on your driver's license that gave you a carbon credit? So you got so many carbon credits on your driver's license, and it would automatically be de-ticked for every trip you made in and out of the valley, so that you would know what your use was, and you had to start paying for your carbon credits in order to make more trips. Or people coming to the Ojai Valley needed to have a carbon credit card for the trips they're going to take in and around the valley. So some
You
kind
actually
of...
de-radicalized our proposal. The car was gonna stop once you reach the carbon limit.
Shopping cart, right?
You're gonna be like the people that alcohol typically drive.
Down, is that it?
That's it.
Okay, I wanted to add something. Basically, we need to have all existing buildings rehabbed and retrofitted for energy and use, because embodied energy is saved energy. And every time you build a structure, so every garage, where possible, should be converted into a portable house.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, we would be known as the Bike City, and we have several conflicting things, but I'm just going to read them all. Also, a degree for all, where we would have Latinos included, the homeless would be included as part of the green agenda. Older cars would only be used by multiple persons. Ojai would be attractive to tourists because it was the bike city. That's how we would be selling ourselves if we decided to go that way. Vacant buildings would be available for the homeless and other purposes. The city would have no cars whatsoever in the city center. The economy would be localized as a gift economy to promote degeneration. It would no longer be dependent on capitalism. We would have compost toilets, and as somebody else mentioned, it would be for everyone. The valley would have a fuel break around the perimeter of the valley. We would have front and backyard gardens. Everyone would be part of a food share. Each block would have their own communal garden. People would get tax credits for growing food at home. The trolley would not only be electric, it would be free, and it would run frequently. All streets, another proposal was all streets would be bike and walking only. There would be no Airbnbs to take away from our affordable housing stock. The utility maintenance and trucks used by the city would be, their use would be greatly diminished, and perhaps they could use a small vehicle when we need to have a large one. The Ojai Valley Inn would now be an education center for green living. The golf course would be converted into a huge community garden, and also would have plants for sequestration. The Chaparral School would again be a community center with gardens and green education. We would be known as a leader in green education and living. Electrical lines would be underground. All students would either walk or bike to school, not just for green reasons, but for health reasons. There would be a social movement of our leaders, our community leaders, our civic leaders, our student leaders, who will be modeling this way of living. The homeless people would be honored for their low impact on the environment. They, not the ones with all the material goods, would be the ones that we would honor. Tiny homes would be immediately legalized and subsidized. The process of getting a tiny home would be facilitated by the city. We would have a greatly decreased, if not zero, pesticide valley. All homeowners would have gardens, no electric leaf blowers. We would replace tourism with small start businesses. We would have incubators to promote small businesses. We would have a place where small businesses could come and share in resources so that they could sustain themselves. Every home would have used 1/7 of their current use of heat, dryers, shower water. The other thing I can't read, but anything that involves gas consumption, people would use. The city would give out free clotheslines and give tax credits or some kind of incentives for people to use the lines instead of a dryer. Water would be recycled from a shower, from hand washing into a toilet or into outdoor water use. We would have eco-villages. Communal living would not just be, what do you call it, when you get a citation or something, it would actually be encouraged and promoted. Everything would be done in the city to promote that kind of thing. We would have a massive change in our building codes to include earth homes. They would be legal and they would be promoted. We would have carbon offsets that would be kept, and those offsets would be kept in the valley to support our green programs. We would have e-bikes, not cars. We would get some kind of incentive for people to use e-bikes. We would have safe streets so people would feel safe riding their bikes. This would include accident prevention as well as an absence of fumes.
Now, again, we're going to have to keep moving.
Okay.
Just focus on the climate one, that's fine.
Okay, the city hall would, well, we already did that. We would have shifted values from consumers of the community. City would promote community activities, green activities, et cetera. Animals would be respected. Let's see if I can try to skip some of this. We would have a city solar farm and microgrids. We would have, again, a real effort to really create a climate in our community, very positive impact, like it's cool to do these things. We would also support our emotional and mental health in going through these changes. No diesels or trucks, excellent, all electric, free trolley, we've already said that. Water catchment. Oh, trees planted. The city would promote the planting of trees, give subsidies wherever they needed to, and they would have a much more strict enforcement of saving trees. Zero waste trash. If there are newcomers to the tourism, they have to take public transportation, electric bikes would be subsidized. There would be a van that goes from Ventura from Ojai to Ventura and back again with one stop in Oakville. Another one was 2 times a week, there would be a bus that would go to Trader Joe's for all of those who go to Trader Joe's. And back again. That would be very viable. And on the way, we can party and ask questions and support each other.
Well, Trader Joe's could give us money.
Basically, as citizens, everybody would feel it's their privilege to promote and model these new values and practices.
Great. Thank you.
You have your own list. I think it'll be an addendum, but I won't duplicate.
Yeah, that would be good.
A lot of inspiration here. I'll preface to say I'm an optimistic cynic when it comes to true consciousness shift of our species. But, you know, it's been done, so maybe we'll err on the side of the bonobos rather than the chimpanzees in the future. If you don't know what I mean, look up the bonobos, monkeys. Transportation, well, 75% less cars on the road. Quieter streets, we hear more birds than cars. Green car incentives, which ties into creating a community currency for equanimity. So everyone of any income and revenue stream can afford to live resiliently and sustainably. So that requires a community currency or some kind of model outside of our normal capitalistic consumer approach to our lifestyles. More car chargers on the street to support those that are driving electric cars. One-way streets for traffic calming and street calming and flower boxes to make it even slower within the streets. Electric trikes provided for the older communities who may not have the wherewithal to ride two-wheel bikes. More rickshaws. And even electric rickshaws. In terms of energy, more focus on wind and community microgrids. Pelton wheels, if you don't know what a Pelton wheel is, it goes in the water stream and turns, and the water makes it turn and it creates energy. So I've seen design where there's Pelton wheels in the water pipes, and they know where they're located, so you can access them if there's maintenance. More dynamos. So there's some gyms in this country where when people work out, the spinners and the treadmills provide energy for those buildings. It's really old school technique forgotten about.
Exercise equipment to generate electricity.
Yeah. So dynamos that design's also been used for sidewalks in Europe, I've seen, where just the pressure of your feet walking is enough pressure to generate microcurrent, and they're generating electricity through that. Solar roads has also been implemented, and we can do that. And biodigesters, which was used earlier, but the gas off from that being used to generate electricity. Exhaust of rainwater harvesting design plans, which includes a full design plan for the city using swales and just everything we can do to slow spreading sink water. One of my favorites, beaver reintroduction in the waterways. Even in the waterway that runs through town, regenerating the waterways that run right through the city. Like the creek, before my time, used to go right through where the arcade is, in the back of the arcade, and under the street, but now it's just where Libby Park is, on the side of Libby Park. So regenerating those waterways and pulling out as much cement from those areas as you can, so the water can slow down and sink.
Hey, Ray, stick to climate.
Okay. Well, to me, water cools. So when we have more trees, when we have more water, there's a cooling. So it's not emissions.
Correct.
To the extent you can, just try just focus on the climate impacts.
Affordable housing, which we've decided does impact that. So 3D affordable by design housing, hempcrete, industries that are located here that have almost zero waste in the construction process. Using on-site soils for the 3D printing. And alternative materials for building, like cob and straw bale and hempcrete, are the norm. They're not considered an alternative material, and they're all legal. And there's pre-permitted designs, a library, that you can go in and just get over-the-counter designs to build, which reduces the price of building considerably. Underground building, we talk about going up. Well,
Now, are you staying on climate?
yeah, because this is affordable housing. So if we put storage, if the storage industries and other industries that can go underground, then we have more room on top, because we have very limited, Randy Haney speaks about how Ojai is a maintenance community, not a development community, because we don't have the land. But we go underground, and we put some things underground, we have more land to build affordable housing on. People can stay here and not commute in. Please, is there anything else? I'll go in there.
Just food forests, the idea that we have, mostly what we talked about was local bounty, and just increasing that local bounty, again, getting back to what we talked about earlier, not needing to be commuting in and out of Valley. So that was a lot of our discussions around that, and supporting the ideas that have already been raised in other groups. So I think we consolidate in there.
That's great. Let's go. Okay, getting to the end here pretty quick, but yes.
I just want to make one comment. I read an article a couple months ago, and I can't even remember who the author was, but it really hit home, and basically it was about climate change. And the statement that they made was, and this is especially in the United States, and probably a lot of first world countries, where we built our housing and how we built our housing is why we have climate change. Because not only the methods and materials, but the way we planned it, and like the suburbs, and you have to drive somewhere to work. You have to bring stuff in and take stuff out. And the whole energy efficiency of building and everything. So I just want to bring it up because I know the housing keeps coming up, and it's like, how does that connect to climate change? And I think it really makes sense.
Very good.
And maybe you mentioned this, Ray, but the idea of the pre-approved cob building plans, with cob and materials that come from the ground, not trees that take years and years and years to grow and develop, but using natural, hay and straw and clay, natural building materials, pre-approved plans for fire
Very good.
safety and resiliency.
Yeah, now, again, we're not going to discuss all of these right now, because...
No, there's one quick thing I forgot that's important. And that is from the top down, a city commitment to plant X amount of trees by when.
Very good. Very good. And you had a quick comment?
Yeah, putting things underground is one of the solutions being implemented in London, and the main thing they're putting underground is residential parking. So all the historical buildings are being kept intact, and to create parking, they're putting garages underneath them.
Got it. Okay, so if you just step back, and this has been the sort of where the climate committee began, is you've got a huge list of possibilities up here. One of my old teachers once taught me, if you can imagine it, it's possible. But it's also important to make a big distinction, and this is something that I teach my clients a lot, is because it's counterintuitive, is to appreciate, though, that possibilities are not realistic. Possibilities do not exist in reality. By definition, it's not real. That's what a possibility means. If you had evidence and could prove a possibility, it wouldn't be a possibility, it would be an example. It would be an option. So one of the things that we're having to think through here is to be able to distinguish between what's possible and are we committed to that possibility, and that puts leadership into a creative relationship to the future rather than a problem-solving relationship to the future. Now, we were going to today take the question of, okay, if you were committed to some of this, or if you just took the top 5, or if you just took 1, and you stood in the future as if it had already happened, one of the counterintuitive ways to begin to think about planning is rather than say, how do we get there, to begin to say, how do we get here? So if you took anything that any of you said, any element of the vision that you articulated, and you could mentally imagine that it was already reality, then you'd have to have a narrative or a story of how did it happen. How did you get from 2020 to 2025? Not how are you going to get to 2025, but how did you get to 2025? And I'll let you look at it, on your way out if you want. But there's an exercise that we try to do to get us in a sort of what-ifing and creative kind of mindset. And since today was really a beginning, we're not going to work it today. But I want you to maybe leave with a conversation of how did it happen. If you think about it, most of us are very busy. That's here. Most of us have a pretty full plate of activities. And we look at the future like we have all kinds of space and options in the future. Yes or no? Generally, that's our predisposition toward the future. But also, typically speaking, most of us are either procrastinating or pushing off in front of us or trying to say we'll get there someday. Another way of saying it, rather than we're specific now and we have choice in the future, to say when we get to the future, we're not going to have any choice at all. On December 31st, 2025, we will have whatever emissions we have. People's behavior and activities will be whatever they are. Our educational activities and programs and offers will be whatever they are. There will be zero choice at a specific time in the future. And so just as a mental exercise and as a way of beginning to open up your thinking going out of here, is stand in any part of that vision that you're committed to. Take any element in any of your visions that you had, imagine that it's already a fact. And then ask yourself the question, how did it happen? Who committed to what? Because the only time you can take an action that's going to affect how the future turns out is right now. Would you agree with that? Yes. You can't take an action tomorrow. Not possible, because tomorrow will be today again. So the only time you can do anything at all, ever, to affect the future is in this present moment. So if you can imagine standing in the factual future, the vision is not a goal. The vision is a place to start. It's a ground of being. It's a place to come from. And ask yourself the question, what did I do back then that had today be the way it is now? So I'm inviting you to stay in this whole conversation like an inquiry. And pick any part of the vision that you particularly care about or that you're committed to. Whether it's housing, homeless, emissions, whatever it may be that connects to making a difference in some way. And ask yourself what happened in 2020 that had it be the way today. Because oftentimes the problem with change and change activities is that people are talking about change without changing anything. So it's important to be able to distinguish between talking about what we need to do and making that reality. So that's intended to provoke or open up or at least have you consider, because this is the work that the climate committee's in. We don't know the answer. We are engaged in the question of how do you need to think about this, how do you need to look at it. And if you try to get your hands around all of that at the same time, you get quickly buried or get resigned or get overwhelmed. And so it's important to be able, just as a participant in the community, to ask yourself, what part of this vision am I committed to? And what did happen then that made today possible? Coaches do not go into a game to find out who wins. They have to go into the game committed that the game's already won. And from that point of view, it's possible for us as individual human beings to participate in and create the future that we all share, that we want. Because at the end of the day, it is a common future. At the end of the day, we are co-creating it anyway. And the milieu in which we're doing this is mostly in our relationships and our conversations and our commitments with each other. So on behalf of the Climate Committee, and I'll let everybody speak for themselves, we really, really value you being here. And we're going to ask you for some feedback on the day. But at the end of the day, this is why we are the committee we are and why we were appointed by the commissions, is to invent what is the narrative that had the future happen. What is the way that we came into being able to be 100% fossil free, if that's it? How did we get from a heavily fossil dependent reality to a total electrical reality? Now, how did that happen? And that's really the inquiry that we're engaged in, and what we're going to be using all of your input today to help nurture and inspire and engage our conversations in terms of trying to create that scenario. Because we're looking for a scenario of how did it happen? Who needs to do what? When? By where? And make that reality come into existence. Before I wrap, I'm going to give the committee members a chance to say whatever you'd like to say at the end of the day, and please do.
Well, I'll speak up. Good job, Jim, and everybody for participating today. My vision of Ojai in the future, and I don't know if it'll be 5 years, 10 years, whatever, but is a future related to climate change that has eliminated fossil fuels. No gasoline, no natural gas. I look at it in my own life, in our household. My wife and I, we're committed to eliminating gasoline vehicles. I have an electric car. My wife will soon have an electric car. We have solar panels on the roof to generate electricity. We are in the process of appliance by appliance eliminating all the natural gas uses. The next one is the solar water heater to eliminate the gas water heater. But our vision is to have no natural gas use, no gasoline use in our household. Now that doesn't talk about my shirt. I know my shirt has a fossil fuel footprint, and my shoes do, and everything in our life does. But that's what I visualize for Ojai, is an electrified Ojai where the electricity is generated by solar or other renewable energy, that we've made the transition from fossil fuels to clean energy, zero carbon energy. I know that's not the whole picture. There are many other things that can be done, but that's the vision that I have. Oh, one more thing about that. And the point was made by, I can't remember her name, talked about the poor people would like to have an electric car, but they don't have the money. And that is true. I mean, I'm a reasonably wealthy person. I can afford to buy an electric car and put solar panels on my roof. Many people can't. And part of this solution is going to be finding the money to make this transition, to helping people pay for these changes that need to happen. That needs to be a big part of the solution. I don't have the answer, but we need to find that answer.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, today it's been a very productive workshop. Some of the ideas that were brought up maybe 20 years ago might have been, considered almost, too radical. But now we're at a point where these ideas are actually, some of them coming to fruition, and some of these ideas, with all of us working together, are going to be reality pretty soon. I know many of you from other community level projects, and I know everyone here is very committed to what we're doing here. And so it's just great to see everyone in the room and working through these ideas. And hopefully at least several of these will stick and we can start to work together. I think for every idea that someone has, that could spread on to other members of the community. So I thank everyone for coming, and I look forward to continuing working with everyone.
Yeah, thanks again to everyone for coming out. It really is just amazing to see probably 15 of us here today. And I'm sure there are plenty that couldn't make it. So thank you all for spending the time and sharing your ideas. The committee is going to be meeting over the next few months. We kind of are in existence through May as an ad hoc committee. And in that time, we'll be presenting recommendations to the council. And our plan is to have a follow-up workshop, something probably similar format to this, in April or May, where we can delve deeper into some of the topic areas, maybe bring in a couple outside, or outside, I say we have plenty of experts here to talk about some of these topic areas in more detail, and have maybe working groups and brainstorm those solutions, which we didn't get a really chance to talk about today. So we have now a email that can go to the committee. It's climate@ohighcity.org.
Climate@ohighcity.org.
Yeah, you have it written down up there. And Jim has created a few kind of questions for feedback, if you'd be willing to provide feedback on today's session. Those are just some ideas to get you thinking. And I think that's all. Before we wrap up, Steve will say some final remarks. But we're going to be closing up this meeting, but feel free to linger around. Several of us will stick around, so if you have a conversation that you want to keep on having, we have the room a little bit longer, so feel free to linger.
Steve?
And I just wanted to thank everyone for showing up. I think it was a very creative exercise. I mean, the list of things that have come out of this are really tremendous, and they will be used and worked with by this committee. I am just, this is a climate emergency. I mean, I'm with John Kerry and Arnold Schwarzenegger, who, as a bipartisan group, are forming what they call World War Zero. I mean, this is, to get from where we are now to where we need to get is not business as usual. It's not small changes. It is going to be painful. It's going to be hard work. But if you look at the one graph we didn't talk about, we actually can and have in the state of California increased our output at the same time that we dropped our footprint individually and collectively. It can be done, it will be done, and it must be done.
So as Michelle said, we're inviting you to send us feedback. We've given you some questions to chew on, but we're welcoming any kind of feedback. Was today useful? And if so, how? Did you feel you had a chance to participate and contribute? Are there any other suggestions you have if we do this, when we do the next one, in terms of improving their value and their usefulness? And finally, anything else you'd like to say, we'd certainly welcome it. And as Michelle said, we'll stick around if anybody wants to continue the conversation. You're more than welcome to do so. And until then, we thank you and appreciate your participation.